Due to the mature nature of this content, language, and death, viewer discretion is advised.
He made a way to his anger. He spared not their soul from death, but gave their life over to
pestilence.
the pestilence.
Noun. Any epidemic disease that is highly contagious, infectious, virulent and devastating.
And there shall be famines, and pestilences, and fearful sights.
To see whether the pandemic has gotten even worse because of family gatherings for Thanksgiving. The nationwide death toll from COVID-19 reached more than 263,000 yesterday. And for the first time, U.S. hospitals are treating more than 90,000 coronavirus patients. Millions of Americans celebrated in large groups yesterday, despite warnings from health officials.
This is an Omega Watchman Media Group production.
This know also, that in the last days, perilous times shall come.
This is the worst hunger crisis in modern American times. The situation is absolutely perilous, and unless the federal government does something big and quick, we're going to see starvation conditions like this country hasn't seen since
the pandemic and infected economy have many Americans experiencing food insecurity for the first time. And with Thanksgiving, the need is greater than ever. Here's CBS's Tom Hansen.
AT&T Stadium in Texas is enormous, but it's still not large enough to hold all of the cars coming for food ahead of Thanksgiving. People spilling onto nearby streets and gratefully driving away with 80-pound boxes of groceries.
They just care for us. They know the situation.
If a picture tells 1,000 words, the images outside food banks all over America could write a novel on need.
Now, due to the virus, the money is not there.
It's an ongoing pandemic putting a crisis into focus. In Miami, people waiting online for hours.
If it weren't for these sites, would you be able to get food on the table?
Not really.
The images across the country tonight of American families in need. Estimates show more than 50 million Americans could go hungry this year. Thousands of families spending hours on food lines today, many losing their jobs in the struggling economy. Their stimulus benefits set to expire.
Happy Thanksgiving!
For many families, it was a Thanksgiving they never envisioned. Dinner to go.
We just had to do something different.
This Colorado couple, who usually host, setting out takeaway orders for friends and family.
I'll be there at 1:15. I'll be there at 12:30. And I want both, or no, just wipe me. It's just a hoot.
A scaled-down Macy's parade reflected heartfelt appreciation for the nation's frontline workers as the daily COVID toll remains relentless. 2,000 more deaths, the most since July. At least 263,000 lives lost in the U.S. since the pandemic began. The CDC now says it believes the country is severely undercounting the number of cases, and the real number could be 8 times higher.
I work in the COVID units almost daily. They are filling up very, very fast.
After the Supreme Court blocked New York from enforcing crowd restrictions on houses of worship, saying it violated religious freedom, the state's Democratic governor called the decision irrelevant because the measures had already expired.
I think this was really just an opportunity for the court to express its philosophy and politics. It doesn't have any practical effect.
In South Dakota, where the COVID positivity rate is 43%, the Republican governor is still strongly resisting a mask mandate. West Virginia's governor is defending his mask mandate as the state breaks its COVID hospitalizations record.
I had many people that were calling, and they were saying to me over and over and over, we want to be like South Dakota. We want to be South Dakota. Well, I don't want to be South Dakota.
In Denver, Mayor Michael Hancock has ignited a furious backlash. For weeks, he encouraged people not to travel.
I'm asking, I'm urging, I'm pleading with everyone. Please stay home.
Even tweeting that message on Wednesday, just before boarding a flight to Mississippi for Thanksgiving with his wife and daughter. The mayor now apologizing, saying, I humbly ask you to forgive decisions that are born of my heart and not my head.
Millions of Americans are in desperate need. 778,000 workers have filed new unemployment claims, up for the second week in a row. More than 20 million now collecting benefits. This line of cars take a look at a food bank in Miami Springs, Florida. This morning, it stretched down the street for miles. Food banks across the country say they are seeing a surge in demand, and they fear they won't be able to keep up. ABC's Victor Oquendo is in Pembroke Park, Florida.
Tonight, millions of Americans lining up for food before Thanksgiving, and the crisis is only getting worse.
It's been a big help for me and my family, man.
This food bank in Bergen County, New Jersey,
Happy Thanksgiving!
has provided 670,000 meals to more than 45,000 families, and they can't keep up with demand.
We were averaging around 150 cars each Tuesday. Now it's over 500. We still turn people away because we run out of food.
The lines are getting longer in California.
It's very stressful not knowing if you're going to have enough money for your daily needs.
50 million Americans facing food insecurity in the middle of the pandemic, an increase of 43%. 1 in 4 children don't have enough to eat.
The need for food is staggering. Just take a look from our drone. The line here at this food distribution site in Miami Springs stretches for miles.
Feeding South Florida holding daily distributions since March, when they were receiving 160 truckloads of food per week. Now that number is down to just 14.
Without more funding, how can you keep this up?
Without more funding, it's impossible to keep this up. We're relying on our local farmers, we're relying on our local ranchers, on our local distributors and manufacturers to try to bring in as much food as possible, but we're trying to make do with what we got.
In Houston, more than 1 in 5 adults recently reported going hungry, most of them in Black and brown communities.
Every person is important. Every person has value. And every person, we ought to give them an opportunity to live.
With the CARES Act expiring at the end of the year, nearly 14 million Americans are set to lose their economic lifelines. Here at the Feeding South Florida warehouse, they are working around the clock to meet the skyrocketing demand, but supplies are dwindling.
You're looking at bumper-to-bumper traffic outside a food bank in Dallas over the weekend, where volunteers handed out groceries, including 5,000 turkeys ahead of the Thanksgiving holiday. Researchers from Northwestern University estimate food insecurity in America doubled in the first few months after the coronavirus arrived. A recent CBS News poll shows more than 1/3 of Americans are at least somewhat concerned they won't have enough money for groceries in the next year. Errol Barnett reports now on the growing need before the holidays.
All righty, thank you so much. Have a good Thanksgiving.
It's a scene playing out across the country. Jam-packed food banks like this one in Arlington, Texas, which provided Thanksgiving meals for 5,000 families.
It's just crazy to see the turnout, and it's crazy to see the love, that we so desperately need.
Lee Cowan spoke to hungry families in San Antonio for Sunday morning, including Catherine Wynn, a mother of 5 who lost her job as a housekeeper during the pandemic.
You have to decide if you're going to pay a bill or not, or decide to go get groceries, and maybe your water or your lights might get turned off the next month or something.
In Atlanta on Sunday, people waited for hours after Tyler Perry announced he would give away Thanksgiving supplies and gift cards at his studio to the first 5,000 families. Traffic backed up for miles. The event began at 8 a.m. and the studio ran out of groceries by 10 a.m. In Los Angeles, Adolfo Escobar also waited hours to pick up his holiday groceries.
It's not easy. I lost my job. I had 4 months with no income.
Food insecurity disproportionately affects Black and Latino Americans, especially those with kids. As the need grows nationwide, some volunteers are noticing another trend.
Many of the cars you see coming through here, this pandemic is the first time they've ever called for help.
An analysis from the hunger relief organization Feeding America projects more than 50 million Americans will have experienced food insecurity this year. That's up from around 35 million before the pandemic.
What the pandemic did was push people from poverty and hunger deeper and push people at the edge into hunger and poverty.
Joel Berg is CEO of the nonprofit advocacy group Hunger Free America.
This is the worst hunger crisis in modern American times. Unless the federal government does something big and quick, we're going to see starvation conditions like this country hasn't seen since the Great Depression.
AT&T Stadium in Texas is enormous, but it's still not large enough to hold all of the cars coming for food ahead of Thanksgiving. People spilling onto nearby streets and gratefully driving away with 80-pound boxes of groceries.
They just care for us. They know the situation that we're going through.
The display of need playing out all over a deeply suffering nation. In San Jose, bins bursting with turkeys. In the Bronx, lines backed up for blocks. And in South Florida,
Hi, happy Thanksgiving.
the Miami Marlins stepping up to the plate, handing out 1,000 Thanksgiving meals.
We're not doing it because we have to. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do. Having an ability to give back and have an impact in the community is important to us.
As much food distributed here in the pandemic's first 4 months as the entire previous year.
The amount of families that cannot put food on their table, that are struggling to keep a roof over their head, is out of control.
Paco Velez of Feeding South Florida says about half of those now lining up at food pantries are doing so for the first time.
How long is this sustainable before you don't have enough food to provide people that have need for it?
This tremendous need that we're seeing all across the country and here in South Florida is absolutely not sustainable. As families continue to go month after month after month with no resources, things are getting progressively worse.
Accelerating this crisis, a looming food cliff. At the end of the year, hundreds of millions in federal dollars for food banks provided by the CARES Act will run out, leaving many wondering where their next meal might come from.
Definitely critical. People have nowhere else to turn.
Desperation mixed with gratitude on display in long lines all across the country.
Sometimes we don't have enough for we could buy our dinner. And thanks God they're giving us the free turkey and the other vegetables.
The CEO of Feeding South Florida says that without any additional help from Congress, once the CARES Act expires on December 31st, they're looking at the amount of food coming in being slashed approximately in half. This at the same time, guys, as the rise of increase of need is about 100% or more. As you look over my shoulder right now, this right here, Hoda, is just a snapshot. This line extends all the way around the fairgrounds where I am for a couple of miles. Jeez. They have 600 meals to give out on this morning, and when those are out, that's it for the morning. That is so incredibly distressing, and those are the people in line. There are some people who are suffering in silence. They're at home. Do we know how big this problem is overall? Feeding America, the national organization, Hoda, estimates it's about 50 million people in America that are going to experience food insecurity this year. That is about 1 in 6. For children, we heard Gabe talking about the impacts of coronavirus on children. It's 17 million. 1 in 4 kids in the United States is going to experience food insecurity this year because of the pandemic. God, we call it food insecurity, but they're hungry. I mean, that's really what it is.
Tonight of American families in need. Estimates show more than 50 million Americans could go hungry this year. Thousands of families spending hours on food lines today, many losing their jobs in the struggling economy. Their stimulus benefits set to expire within weeks. Here's ABC's Elwin Lopez.
We appreciate you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Tonight, a record number of families looking for help this Thanksgiving to avoid going hungry. In Atlanta, many waiting for hours, even on Thanksgiving.
Normally, these people would be lined up at the buffet line, but this year, due to COVID-19, they're lining up in cars, dozens of them waiting to get a bag of food ahead of the holidays.
Clear away.
At this nonprofit, Hosea Helps, the need skyrocketing 300% amid the crippling pandemic. Dominic Minifield telling us this is his first time in line.
It's been very hard. It's been for me and my family. It's been tough.
From coast to coast, lines like these stretch as the need continues to grow. In Houston, the Super Feast event serving some 20,000 families.
I have nothing at home. Seriously, nothing.
So this is a huge help today.
It sure is.
Feeding America projecting more than 50 million people will face food insecurity this year, 15 million more than last year. Several food banks tell us donations are down this year. With so many unemployed, people have less to give.
I'm Sam Brock in Miami. If a picture tells 1,000 words, the images outside food banks all over America could write a novel on need.
Now, due to the virus, the money is not there.
It's an ongoing pandemic putting a crisis into focus. In Miami, people waiting online for hours.
If it weren't for these sites, would you be able to get food on the table?
Not really.
Feeding South Florida has seen demand double.
We went from serving 706,000 food insecure to over 1.5 million families in need of assistance.
At this food site in Miami, the line started at 11 o'clock last night. Behind me, there were about 600 people in this parking lot waiting to come and get their meal. Once they hit that number, everyone else is redirected to another location.
An estimated 50 million people will be food insecure this year, and 17 million kids, or 1 in 4. A situation only set to worsen as federal dollars from the CARES Act.
This morning, we're waiting to see whether the pandemic has gotten even worse because of family gatherings for Thanksgiving. The nationwide death toll from COVID-19 reached more than 263,000 yesterday. And for the first time, U.S. hospitals are treating more than 90,000 coronavirus patients. Millions of Americans celebrated in large groups yesterday, despite warnings from health officials. Adriana Diaz is in Chicago, where busy hospitals are preparing to get even busier. Adriana, good morning.
Good morning. Well, here at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, they've actually reduced elective surgeries just to make sure there's enough room for the increased number in COVID cases they're seeing. And listen to this. Local health officials say 1 in every 17 Chicagoans is carrying the virus. And that's why doctors across this city and the nation are trying to curb the spread to avoid what could be a devastating holiday season.
I was worried after Halloween. I'm far more worried after Thanksgiving.
Hospitals are bracing for a post-holiday influx of COVID patients. Dr. Mita Shah works in the ER at Chicago's Rush University Medical Center.
We will not get a reprieve because then Christmas comes and then New Year comes. So if we're just stacking surge upon surge upon surge, I am significantly worried about that.
The lobby at Rush has been transformed into a COVID triage area to make room in case there's a surge of patients in the coming days. And though a projected 50 million Americans still traveled for the holiday this weekend, outside Los Angeles, this bumper-to-bumper traffic wasn't for holiday travel. It was to pick up a Thanksgiving meal from a food bank.
So many people just appreciate being here, being able to get out.
In Northwest Indiana, volunteers rallied to keep a local tradition alive, turning a massive Thanksgiving feast for 1,500 into a drive-through celebration.
God, we lift up these families who are mourning the loss of their loved ones because of COVID.
For others, the holiday was a time to reflect on a difficult year. Members of a church in hard-hit South Dakota set up hundreds of empty chairs outside the state capitol, one for every South Dakotan who succumbed to the virus. And for the Spano family in Connecticut, dinner was tough without their brother and son, Daniel Spano, who's in the picture frame. He died from COVID earlier this year. Thanksgiving was his favorite holiday.
We're gonna video chat and, try to have some sense of normalcy, but no matter what we do, it's not going to be the same.
Back in Chicago, like so many frontline workers, Dr. Shaw spent her Thanksgiving in the ER.
You step out of your front door and you're sad that you're leaving your family on a holiday. But when you walk into these doors, this is your work family. And right now, my work family is hurting.
Here's why Dr. Shaw and so many others are concerned. According to the city's public health commissioner, one Chicagoan is diagnosed with the virus every minute. Jerika?